Greetings and welcome to Dialogue to Action, advancing partnerships between historically Black colleges and universities and African higher education institutions in alignment with the Diaspora as Africa's sixth region. My name is Julian Thompson, and I'm with the United Negro College Fund in the United States of America, and I am pleased to provide opening remarks for this year's summit on behalf of our partners for this special convening, the African Capacity Building Foundation, the Association of African Universities, and the Historic Africa Diaspora Placement Program. This year's symposium attracted tremendous interest from around the world, garnering over 500 registrations from 40 plus countries. We launched this symposium to accomplish four key goals. One, to explore and identify methods of collaboration between HBCUs and higher education institutions on the continent of Africa. Two, to facilitate discussions that enable participants to develop concrete action plans and frameworks. Three, to foster an inclusive environment that builds bridges between the two continents. And four, to provide a platform for sharing successful case studies and promising practices. In the upcoming symposium, you will hear opening remarks from key leaders driving action for both HBCUs and African higher education institutions. You will learn from panels featuring senior leaders shaping the future of both HBCUs and African institutions. And most importantly, you will hear discussions about how to turn dialogue into action, creating meaningful, sustainable partnerships that elevate the promise of higher education on both the African continent and all places where the African diaspora reside. For more information on the symposium, its agenda, and calls to action arising out of the summit, please visit uncficb.org. Enjoy the symposium.
Today's symposium, organized with the Association of African Universities and the United Negro College Fund, is a powerful demonstration of what collaboration looks like in practice. It is about building bridges of knowledge, culture, and opportunity. Colleagues, today's symposium is so compelling, and the timing could not be more urgent. Across the Atlantic, our communities face challenges, ensuring equitable access to higher education, financing student enrollment and mobility, modernizing curricula to match the demands of industry and the digital economy, strengthening research and capacity, and most importantly, preparing the young people to become global citizens who are rooted in identity yet equipped for global leadership. Excellencies, the African Capacity Building Foundation believes that strong institutions and visionary leadership is at the core of a meaningful, sustainable transformation. To this end, since its creation in 1991, ACBF has invested in over 60 think tanks, trained hundreds of thousands of senior professionals in government, and worked with universities to strengthen policy and institutional capacity building. By serving as the Secretariat of ADIB, ACBF is reaffirming its mission to develop human capital, strengthen institutions, and support Africa's socio-economic transformation. We see this symposium as part of that mission. It is not only about ideas, it is about action. Action is what the African Union's Agenda 2063 demands of us. Action that will transform Africa into a prosperous, inclusive, and united continent, fully engaged with its diaspora. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, we today hope we will deliberate and remain cognizant of the reality that many initiatives that have been started before are the useful building blocks to the Africa we want, but that these initiatives as of now remain fragmented. Let us deepen and explore joint research centers, faculty exchanges, curricular innovation, and leadership development program that lead to impactful results. Our task is to connect the many initiatives underway, sustain and scale them to deliver the system changes we imagine. The symposium must therefore be a launching pad for concrete frameworks for partnerships, shared funding models, and institutional agreements that endure beyond individual leaders or projects. If we succeed, the results will be profound. More African students studying at HBCUs, more African American students experiencing Africa firsthand, stronger institutions on both sides of the Atlantic, and a new generation of leaders will carry with them a dual heritage and a global outlook. Mr. Bite is calling for action. May this event not be just another talk show. May the symposium conclude with commitments that will turn in dialogue into frameworks, frameworks into programs, and programs into measurable impact. Together, we can make this transatlantic partnership a cornerstone of Africa's renaissance and a tribute to the resilience of its diaspora. Together, we can prove that the bonds of history can be harnessed as engines for innovation and transformation. I thank you all, and I wish you all a productive and inspiring symposium. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Chimheni, for those remarks. Next, we have remarks from Professor Olusola Oyewole, the Secretary General of the Association of African Universities. Mr. Secretary General, are you available for your remarks?
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Association of African Universities, permit me to congratulate the organizers of this very important dialogue on advancing partnership between historical Black colleges and universities and African higher education institutions in alignment with the diaspora as is Africa's sixth region. AAU, the Association of African Universities, have been involved in collaborative, supportive collaborations between universities in Africa and our friends and our colleagues in the diaspora. Many years ago, about 5 years ago, we've been organizing the annual Diaspora Homecoming, where we give opportunities to our friends in the diaspora to connect to universities in Africa. We have also been involved in supporting some special initiatives that connect our universities to fellow Africans in the diaspora. That's why we encourage institutions in Africa to engage in what we call the virtual diaspora faculties. We believe that with the developments in technology today, our faculties should not just be limited to those who are physically present. And universities in Africa, we have a lot to gain by connecting to the experiences and the expertise of our friends in the diaspora. We hope that more universities will connect to this initiative. For us in the Association of African Universities, we recognize the importance of connecting to the diaspora, and therefore we've been able to set up what we call the African regional offices outside of Africa. We have regional office in Europe, represented in Nottingham University. We also have in Brazil. We have some connections to some universities that are established as our network universities in the USA. We are committed to ensuring that universities in Africa benefit from the expertise from the diaspora. There are so many things we can do together. We can have academic exchanges. We can have virtual graduate supervision. We can even have research collaborations with the diaspora. We hope that as we move forward with this initiative, African universities will be more connected to their brothers and sisters in the diaspora, and I think that this will help to contribute to our development in the African continent. I want to thank all the participants in this particular dialogue, and we hope that it will not just end with this year. We hope that we maintain this type of dialogue beyond this year. Thank you very much for being part of this. Thank you.
Secretary General Ayewole, thank you so much for those remarks. It is wonderful to have you here and so thankful for you and your organization being a part of this momentous occasion. Next up for our opening remarks, we have our Executive Vice President for Research and Member Engagement at the United Negro College Fund, Dr. Walter Kimbrough. Dr. Kimbrough?
Hello, good day to everyone. I want to thank you for participating in this event today. I have to say at the onset that Julian stole a lot of my thunder because he recognized a number of my colleagues. I was trying to make a list, so I'm glad he recognized them. There were a couple presidents and former presidents that I also saw that I want to recognize. Dr. Akakpo, who's at Kentucky State University, and then the former president of University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Juliet Bell, as well as one of my mentors, Dr. James Lyons, who is president of two HBCUs, Bowie State and Jackson State. And Dr. Lyons, I know I still owe you lunch since I'm in Atlanta, so we'll do that next month. I wanted to say that. I also want to recognize the student body president at Talladega College, Rocky, who, if you look on your chat, she's the first person. I'm not surprised. She's the first person to participate in the chat, even though she's saying she's participating in this and in class at the same time, which lets you know some of the challenges we have with competing interests. But it's good to have her on here as well. If you think about it, we really have had these relationships for a long time, and I don't think we've always highlighted them. And so today really becomes an opportunity for us to formalize a lot of these relationships that have existed. My father's a retired United Methodist minister. The United Methodist Church has grown very rapidly across the continent of Africa. In 1992, the Methodist Church started Africa University in Zimbabwe. I've been president of two United Methodist HBCUs, Philander Smith and Dillard University. So I've always had that understanding that there was that relationship between the church and Africa University. And there are 11 United Methodist HBCUs that are supported. So we've always had that kind of interaction. When I was president of Philander Smith in Little Rock, Arkansas, the state of Arkansas had a relationship with the government of Rwanda, and a number of us had Rwandan students on our campuses that were paid for by the government of Rwanda. Those students at Philander Smith were very involved, did very well. Many of them have gone on to medical school here in the United States. So very good partnerships. And then on many of our campuses, there are a number of African faculty members who are very active. I know when I was president of Dillard University, the dean of our business school, Dr. Guike, and one of our prominent political science faculty members, Dr. Okorn, would also make sure they had trips for students that might go to Ghana, might go to Nigeria as a part of their courses and how they taught. So there's been this relationship. But what this does today is for us to start thinking more strategically and to say, how do we have formal relationships with the continent? As was said earlier, how do we make sure that more students in the United States have that experience, as well as students from Africa to experience United States HBCU? So this is a great opportunity. You'll hear from a number of great speakers today, but I hope, as we've indicated, that this will be the start of some formalized relationships between HBCUs and higher education across the continent of Africa. So thank you all for participating today, and which hopefully will be the start of really some great relationships going forward. Once again, thank you. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kimbrough, for those opening remarks. I'm pleased to next invite for opening remarks a representative from the African Union Commission. We're pleased to have with us today Sophia Ashipala, the head of education, science, technology, and innovation for AUC.
I made a copy of this.
And Ms. Mason, we hear you on mute there, but Ms. Ashipala, greetings from the African Union Commission. Excited for your opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Julian, and a very good afternoon from the African Union Commission. We are happy and excited to be here. Indeed, it is my honor to deliver these opening remarks and to extend our warmest greetings and appreciations to the organizers of this timely and transformative symposium. This gathering is a testament to the spirit of unity that binds Africa and its historic diaspora. It also reflects the vision of Agenda 2063, which recognizes the diaspora as the African sixth region and calls for stronger structured partnership that advance our collective aspiration for a prosperous, integrated, and knowledge-driven continent. Over the past decade, under the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, we have made important progress in advancing access to education, promoting science, technology, and innovation, and fostering continental and global partnerships. We have seen growth in intra-Africa collaboration, the strengthening of quality assurance mechanism, and the expansion of initiatives that link education to employability and sustainable development. Yet, as we mark the conclusion of this Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016 to 2025, we are also mindful of the unfinished agenda, ensuring quality learning outcomes, addressing disparities across regions and groups, and harnessing the full potential of the African diaspora in shaping Africa's education and training system. This symposium comes at a critical juncture. By advancing concrete collaboration, we move beyond dialogue toward implementation. Such collaboration can unlock opportunities for joint research and innovation ecosystem that address Africa development priorities, curriculum co-design that reflect Africa and diaspora perspectives, shared platform for knowledge products, and strengthen Africa's global voice in higher education. The African Union Successor Strategy, CESA 2026 to 2035, is out, and we build on lessons learned and place even stronger emphasis on impact, accountability, and inclusive partnership. In this process, the contribution of the diaspora is not optional, it is really essential. Your expertise, your networks, and lived experiences will enrich our vision and ensure Africa education agenda is globally connected, innovative, and future-ready. Let's therefore conclude by commending the organizer for convening this important dialogue. I'm confident that the outcome will go beyond words to shape a practical, fundable, and sustainable blueprint for long-term collaboration. Thank you once again for inviting the African Union to be part of this symposium. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ashipala, and it is wonderful to have the African Union as a partner and collaborator in this work, and so your greetings are so very well received. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. For those of you who have been tracking in the audience, we've now heard opening remarks and greetings from the Africa Capacity Building Foundation, the Association of African Universities, the United Negro College Fund, and the African Union. We have one set of remarks left to give, and that would be from the acting head of mission from the African Union mission, Mr. Tariq Ben Youssef. Mr. Youssef, are you here today and available to give opening remarks? Hearing that he may not be available at this point, I do want to acknowledge that the African Union Mission is a supporter of this work and our collaborative efforts, and want to thank Mr. Youssef for his willingness to be a contributor to this space. And if he's able to join later in the program, we'll certainly find time for him to be able to give his remarks. So with those opening statements, we are now just super excited to be able to move into our first panel conversation. We are thrilled to be able to have with us today a group of HBCU leaders who are going to be speaking about the promising practices that can empower a new era of collaboration. With us today, we have President Brenda Allen, the president of Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. We have President Valerie Kinloch, the president of Johnson C. Smith University in North Carolina. We have President Kofi Akakpo from Kentucky State University in the state of Kentucky. And moderating the conversation today, we have Ed Smith-Lewis, a Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships and Institutional Programs for the United Negro College Fund. I'm pleased to pass the baton to Ed Smith-Lewis to start this dialogue. Ed?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening to everyone joining us from across the Atlantic. As Julian said, I'm Ed Smith-Lewis, Senior Vice President for Strategic Partnerships and Institutional Programs at UNCF's Institute for Capacity Building. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you to this conversation. This is a panel on promising practices for a new era of collaboration. And I have to say, the timing could not be better. We are standing at a once-in-a-generation moment where historically Black colleges and universities and African universities can spark partnerships that are bold, future-shaping, and global in their reach. Think about it. HBCUs were born from a conviction that education transforms destinies. African universities emerged as centers of nation building and innovation. These institutions have always been about possibility, about preparing leaders to meet the future head on. And today, the future is coming at us faster than ever, from artificial intelligence to new knowledge economies and the need for fresh solutions to global challenges. That is why this discussion matters. By joining forces, HBCUs and African universities can create cutting-edge research networks, design cross-continental learning systems, and prepare students for careers that don't even exist yet. Together, we can redefine higher education leadership and what that looks like for the next 50 years. To help us chart that path, I am joined by three visionary presidents whose institutions are already pushing boundaries and testing new models of partnership. And I just can't wait to dive in. So with that, let's kick things off on a personal note. To our panelists, give us a quick snapshot of who you are and what makes your institution such a dynamic player in higher education today. Dr. Kinlock, let's start with you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this panel, Ed and UNCF. I want to thank all of my colleagues who are on this panel with me. Just really quickly, I will say I am Valerie Kinlock, 15th President of Johnson C. Smith University here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the question is, what makes our university special, with a particular focus for me on JCSU? And I'm going to say we're special because we are a historically Black college university, as all of us on this panel are. I mean, at the end of the day, that is what makes us special. We were founded at a time in this country where access to other types of institutions limited our entrance in. JCSU was founded in 1867 as a site for innovation, as a place of safety, as a home place, as bell hooks would tell us. And we have students who are from across the globe. We are special because, as my colleagues from Kentucky State University and from Lincoln University will attest to, because we continue to persevere and we continue to survive when we think about innovation, academic programs, taking care of our communities, ensuring that our students and their families are always well. And we do that with limited resources. So what makes us special is the fact that we continue to persevere and we continue to meet the needs of our students and communities.
I love that. I love that. Dr. Allen, what makes Lincoln University of Pennsylvania special?
Good morning. I'm Brenda Allen, 14th President of Lincoln University. I'm also a proud graduate of Lincoln University. Lincoln University is special for many reasons, but I think in the context of today's conversation, it has been our long relationship with African nations that really set us apart from not just other HBCUs, but from other institutions in the United States. As you all probably know, Lincoln University is the genesis of Black higher education in America. We were started in 1854, full decade before the emancipation of the race in this country, but we were also started to offer baccalaureate degrees from the start. So we are very proud of that history as being the first degree granting historically Black college in the nation. Lincoln's history with Africa, I think, is best described by the phrase from colonization to liberation. We were started specifically to create leaders in the Black community to be able to go back as missionaries to Liberia as the then thought as the solution for the race problem in America. If we could bring Christianity to Liberia and then repatriate Black folk in America there, we could deal with the race problem in America. And interestingly, within its first 100 years, not only did we reject that colonization idea, but in fact, provide the foundation for the first two leaders to go back to their African nations and fight for independence. That would be Nnamdi Azikiwe in Nigeria and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. And so we look at that history and how education, the education at Lincoln University in particular, fostered that thinking and that audacity. I think it's that combination that makes us very special.
I love that. President Akakpo, bring us home. Tell us a little bit about KSU.
Thank you, brother. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kofi Akapo, originally from Togo, West Africa. Joined Kentucky State University for exactly 26 months, 17 days. KSU has been around for the past 139 years. We're getting ready to celebrate our 140th anniversary. What makes KSU special today? I would say mostly 4 years ago, the university went through some dark time, and I was brought on, and we have created a new momentum that is pushing us ahead. We have, when I came, we had about representatives from 4 African nations. Today, we have about 31 nations that we're working with. So the momentum is on our side, and this opportunity is just one of the best for me in the year, so we can have a dialogue and see how we can help our brothers and sisters from the continent.
I love that each of you in your introduction spoke to existing models of collaboration between HBCUs and universities from the continent. Dr. Allen, could you tell us a little bit about what you see as potential models between HBCUs and African universities, and how are they proven to be game-changing and creating real measurable impact? Now, Dr. Allen, you're saying some wonderful things, but we want you to come off mute.
I got you. So I first want to start to say that we have many programs and relationships. Lincoln University continues to be, I think for 6 years in a row, a Fulbright leader. Most of our Fulbright scholars come from the continent. They come as language faculty, they come as visiting faculty, and so we continue that exchange in ways that are both beneficial to those scholars, but also beneficial to Lincoln University. As we know, in a college environment, people are not just sort of isolated in what their area is, but their presence on our campus, their ability to interact and engage in the community at large, I think really helps to broaden the experiences of the students that we have. We also have active participation in study abroad. We have special relationships in Ghana and Nigeria in terms of exchange for students. And so those students are coming here every year, and we're sending students to those countries for short visits or for semester-long visits. Just continuing that transatlantic education that started, 100 or so years ago. I think we are missing some opportunities today, though. I'm especially interested in the ways in which technology can help us to manage some of the costs that these exchanges bring upon us. Often our students from the continent are strapped for cash. I was just reading something recently about Nkrumah, who said that he probably could have gotten even much more out of his experience at Lincoln if he didn't have to work so hard to try to pay his bill, right? And here we are 100 plus years later, and that's still the story of many of our students. And so the question is, how might we also use technology better to create these cross continent conversations? I was mentioning to someone yesterday that during COVID, our students couldn't travel from Nigeria or Ghana or any other places on the continent, and we used virtual classes, and they showed up. The timing differences were there, but their dedication to education was there. And the fact that they were able to interact with our students in real time made a real difference and brought a richness to those experiences overall. And so, how might we use technology to do that more? We started this conversation with folks from Liberia a few years ago, but with the change and leadership and so on, the conversation went away. But I think we should be really more practical about how we can use these new things that are available to us to make sure that we keep these connections going, because the most important thing is that we are in conversation together. History has shown us that much of the Pan-Africanism and the thought in the anti-colonial nationalist movement that people like Ezekwe and Nkrumah took back to Africa started in their conversations, not just in the classroom on Lincoln's campus, but in their conversations with African American students as they were a part of this community. And it's that kind of cross dialogue, I think, that really helps to broaden and deepen our ability to solve some of our contemporary problems.
Dr. Allen telling us about the importance of connectivity and engagement of our students and our faculty, dare I say our leaders, across our institutions within each other's content.
Recording in progress.
We had spoken about going both ways, not only visiting the continent, but having those from the continent visit us. Dr. Kinlock, I would like you to jump in there and say, how is Johnson C. Smith living up to that and building on that kind of collaboration?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's good to be back in conversation with all of you. You know, clearly without struggle, there's no progress.
Hey.
And so we continue to persevere even when we are under attack. So thank you all for coming back and for having us. I'm going to say the collaboration. And so your question about collaboration. So your question about collaboration and how do we foster it?
How Johnson C. Smith living up to that? And then how do we foster more of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me just start by saying, you know, this summer of 2025 was really instrumental for the leadership team here at Johnson C. Smith University. I decided to take a small delegation of folks to West Africa. And we started in Lagos, Nigeria, where we spent a week really developing partnerships, reimagining the existing partnerships that we have there with various universities, and thinking about what I like to call a multi-sectorial partnership with Johnson C. Smith and with all of West Africa. We started in Lagos and visited various institutions, cultural sites, and universities. I think one way of fostering these relationships is by being present and by showing up and by being in a learning environment where we are listening and we are thinking about the deep, rich cultural and intellectual practices that are in West Africa, and how we can build on those practices at our various institutions here in the United States, HBCUs in particular. So we discussed what an inter-semester program would look like, one that is truly collaborative, one that not just brings our students from Johnson C. Smith to Lagos or to other parts of West Africa, but that actually brings students from there here. And I understand the trials and tribulations of, you know, traveling and transportation and getting in to the United States during these times. And so we really talked about what would a robust digital infrastructure look like, where we are partnering with faculty and staff and students, and we are reimagining what exchange programs could be and could look like. I think the other part of this multi-sectorial partnership that I'm trying to advance here at JCSU is thinking about this global ecosystem and how this global ecosystem must enter into our classrooms. So we can't just have exchange programs or digital innovations without looking at our curriculum and thinking about how are we teaching the basic principles of humanity, particularly from a Black and African-American perspective. What does that look like? What does it involve? And how are our students already and could be better global citizens by looking at curricular experiences that we have? So we are starting with, for example, our College of Business and Professional Studies. And with the dean of that college who traveled with me, we are creating an opportunity to have students travel to, gonna go all the way to Ghana now. I'm leaving Nigeria and going to Ghana, to Ghana, which was the second part of our trip. And immersed not just within a university, but also within a community, a space outside of the university where we are problem solving and problem posing with families and children who need us the most. And then we take that experience, and that becomes the basis for a problem-based research initiative that we actually propose. So I think it's multi-pronged, it's multi-connected, and we sustain these partnerships through digital innovations. When we cannot physically travel, we can travel technologically. And that's part of what we're building our curriculum to do here at JCSU.
I love that. Dr. Akakpo, let's continue to build on that. I think what I heard from President Allen and Kinlock is that partnerships are powerful when it lifts everyone. And these cross-continental collaborations can really supercharge research, faculty development, inspire leadership. Talk to us about how these sort of professional pathways can emerge, grow, expand on both sides of the Atlantic, and how Kentucky State's leaning in that area.
Well, thank you for the question, and I'm glad most of us are back. So thank God for that. Kentucky State has been really active with the partnership with Africa. We started a year and a half ago with Rwanda.
Recording in progress.
Where we were able to sign some articulation agreement with RICA in Rwanda, as well as University of Rwanda. And through this effort, we were able to bring the number keep going up. I have my vice provost with me online, but I think we have over 15 or 14 students from Rwanda by now. And then we took the partnership to the country of Mali. And this one was done through USAID, where we had the opportunity to meet with all the government officials. We were so excited by what happened to USAID. So that is paused now. And then we went to Cameroon and signed other articulation there as well. And that also opened the door for some students to come to KSU, which we never had before. But one thing I will say is it's a win-win truly for us HBCUs to do this. It's not, we're not trying to be helpful to them, but they're also very helpful to us. I will give you an example. I took a group of 4 students with me going to Rwanda. Well, on our way to Rwanda, I asked them if they were taking any classes in the summer. They said no, they were too tired. And I said, guys, come on, you guys are young. They said, no, Doc, it's too much. Then we got to Rwanda. We spent 1 week there. And our last supper before we headed back to the US, they all came to me and said, we registered. And I asked them, what changed? And all 4 of them told me they have never seen that level of commitment in their entire life. The students in Rwanda don't have much, but one thing they have is determination to succeed. And that changed these students for good. We came back, they all registered, and 2 of them graduated last May. 2 of them are still pushing to graduate. So it is truly a win-win for us when we open the door for our students or our faculty and other students from the continent to experience US, and we also experience what's happening on the continent. I do agree with my 2 colleagues. Technology is helping a lot because we can go back and forth. I don't have the time, no, my team has the time. But what we have been doing with Rwanda to keep this going is to have a weekly meeting with the team on the other side. So every Wednesday morning, we have a 1 hour to touch base and make sure we stay on track.
I appreciate that. And all 3 of you mentioned the criticality of technology as an enabler of this exchange. Dr. Akakpo, I want to stay with you here. How can we deepen our engagement through technology? What are some innovative ideas that you're exploring? What are some opportunities in the sort of, what I'm going to say, digitally driven space that could help us sort of expand the work partnership among our institutions?
I think technology is going to be crucial for us. One of the articulation we signed in Mali, they wanted to take advantage of some of our courses. And we do have our online presence, so we're now building a platform for them where professional and students from Mali can take courses from Kentucky State University. We also are trying to see how we can enhance that with our partnership in Rwanda and Cameroon. By the way, the Vice Chancellor of Buya University in Cameroon is coming here next Monday to visit after my visit to Cameroon. So he's trying to reciprocate. So we will talk some more about how we can make this partnership truly a win-win partnership for both sides.
Dr. Allen, same question. How would you build on that? Dr. Allen?
I keep doing that. I'm sorry. As I said in my previous response, we have had fits and starts of trying to figure out how we can use this digital technology to be able to engage across, just across the oceans, right? And I think what President Kinloch said is really very important. In our conversations with Liberia a couple years ago, was very concerned about the infrastructure to support that. And so figuring out how to use maybe even some of the engineering technology that our students are learning here in our universities to be able to use that as a way to help some of the nations that have not very reliable infrastructure around that. How can we do more partnerships there to help build the infrastructure, work with engineers in these various African countries, with engineers who are coming out of our institutions to build some solutions to that. That in of itself, I think, will be a great partnerships for us to do. I think the other thing that I want to always remember, and I'll reiterate from what I said earlier, and that is, it's not enough to offer access to the classes if you don't offer access to the conversations. I think the most important thing is not the content, but the engagement with the content and the ways in which people from these very diverse backgrounds can come together in these conversations to be able to not just explore and learn facts and figures, but to really think about broadly the contemporary sort of thinking around those in ways that can help us to solve problems. And so as I talk to different people about how to best use technology, I'm really interested in making sure that we are in a digital language doing some things more asynchronous in such a way that we are a part of the conversation, which is why it's so important that our students travel to Ghana or to Nigeria or to Cameroon or any of the other countries in Africa, not just to sightsee and see, but to engage. And the same is for the ability to bring people here. So tomorrow we are actually hosting the Minister of Economics from Angola. And we're going to talk about some of these ways that we can actually partner to support infrastructure building that can help us to have a better opportunity to work digitally across our spaces so that we can better engage one another as well as give access to education.
I appreciate that. And I want to ask one more question of you, Dr. Kinloch, but well, two more questions of all of you, but one more question of you, Dr. Kinloch, but I do welcome questions in the chat to our panelists from any of our attendees. But Dr. Kinloch, I've heard a lot of things. I've heard exchanges, I've heard sabbaticals and research experiences. I've heard the leveraging of technology to deepen that engagement. Behind all of those, I heard resources. As we start to think about strengthening the partnership between HBCUs and the continent, how do we also think about sustainability? What's needed to ensure that your institution and other HBCUs, as well as those African universities, are ready to not only engage, but maintain the collaboration?
That's a great question. Resources are extremely important, and we all know that. My two colleagues who are on Zoom with us could, add into this, but I would say if I am thinking about all of our HBCUs, we really need more resources to think about innovation. When we talk about sustaining our partnerships and programs, I think one of the things that's really key to me is how do we do the elevation work? How do we look at what we have? How do we repurpose in some ways? How do we begin to reallocate resources as best we could to high priority areas? How do we get away from doing the things that we've always done? We've always just done certain things and we get the same results. But if we want to increase the results, how do we do things differently? How do we identify the areas in our academic affairs unit, in our IT unit in particular in telecom? And when we think about waste management, when we think about all the things that we are having to do, we must, I believe, reallocate resources and understand the need to not continue to do the same things that we've done for well over 100 years. That's number one for me. Number two is that elevation also includes how do we directly involve our students, our faculty, our staff, our alumni, our surrounding communities and beyond, in thinking about the role technology plays in our daily lives, not just within the curriculum, but even across and beyond the curriculum to make these connections. Dr. Allen talked about infrastructure. And it's really important for us to have the type of infrastructure. One thing that we could be doing, I believe, and I think really supported through the partnership with UNCF, is to think about a digital infrastructure that supports all of our HBCUs so that we're not separately and individually creating our own. So how would it look, particularly with UNCF schools, to have a digital infrastructure that is sustainable, that allows us to pool our resources, that allows us to not be so divided when we have to think about paying for study abroad or paying for the digital connections that we make with people across time zones? And what might that look like? Where might that get us? I think when we talk about a global ecosystem, we have to talk about that other part of the ecosystem. We have HBCUs who are invested in Africa, for example. We have Africa invested in HBCUs here in the United States. We need an infrastructure by which we are all a part of, and we all can do the work so we're not competing, because that's not the job of our HBCUs to compete, but to collaborate.
Dr. Allen, Dr. Akakpo, any additions to that?
Well, I will say it comes down to resource. Everything that we say can be done if we have the resource. I'll give you an example of how resource can play a key role in this type of partnership. At my previous institution, we had a partnership with a school in South Africa. So in one of my trips down to South Africa, I had the opportunity to spend time with the ambassador and the head of a mission in the country. So when I got back, we came up with a plan that I discussed with the ambassador, and he was willing to accompany us. So through the funding from the embassy, we were able to take the partnership to a new level. I will give you an example of what we've done. In Kentucky, we have a huge presence of Toyota, and my school works with Toyota directly. But then the school we visited, they also have a Toyota in town, but they don't have any partnership. So through this resource, we were able to emulate what we have here in the US in South Africa. Now the Toyota is working closely with them, where they're training all the employees, also recruiting the students who are graduated through this partnership. So the resource can get everything done. Even though I left the institution, that partnership is still ongoing. Faculty from here are going there to help teach, and faculty from there are coming back here, back and forth. So it can be done if we can find the resources. You know, we don't have much, but we try to do more with less. And if we want to see this happen, I'm so glad that you guys are behind this. Just help us make it happen.
You know, just add just a couple more things. Number one, you know, when you have a history of having relationships with our African nations and having graduated students, we have to remember that we have a global alumni body. And so how do we reach out to those countries and really get our graduates who either went back home to their country or settled somewhere else on the continent, or even African Americans who decided to go and make their life's work and their life on the continent. And how do we bring that global conversation together? Because it's not as if we are talking to people who have no experience with us. In fact, our alumni are in these countries as well. And so re-engaging them, I think, is important. And then from a resource standpoint, number one is, as President Kinloch said, we have to make it a priority, that being global citizens becomes really very important, I think, to post-graduation success today. So when we prioritize things, we figure out how to get the resources there. One thing that's really important is to make sure that our curriculums on our campus are continuing to invest in knowledge, in offering opportunities for our students to learn these histories and contemporary things about economics globally, but also to be able to have the opportunity to take a deep dive into something that ends up being very important to them. So here we have an active Pan-African Studies department. We have a active Black Studies minor. We found some resources so that we can strengthen those majors in such a way that we are continuing to create individuals on our campus who are interested, who are committed, and who are going to be able to use knowledge to be able to move us further in the next iteration of what this continued liberation looks like.
I love that, and I love all the answers. The reality is we have to invest our time, talent, and treasure, and dare I say our testimony, if we're really going to deepen these partnerships. The title of this virtual summit today is From Dialogue to Action. Final question to each of you, and we're going to go in order of founding. So we'll start with Lincoln, then Johnson C. Smith, and go to Kentucky State University to wrap us up. One headline. That means short and pithy. When we reconvene in 10 years, what's the headline that we'll all read about what we started here today and accomplished at that moment? Dr. Allen.
The headline will be that HBCUs in the U.S. have partnered with colleges on the African continent to create a robust exchange in ideas and engagement.
Dr. Kinloch.
Wow, this is great. The headline will be, this is a good one. Oh my gosh.
Well, we didn't plan for this, guys. It just felt right. It felt right.
The headline is going to be, done that, done. Period. Check. Mic drop. Done. The questions that people have about whether we can and what our purpose is, no question, it will be done. We won't be talking, we will be showing. So no talk, but show.
Love that. Dr. Akapo.
HBCUs are bringing transformation to Africa. Keep in mind that's the continent that has the most young people than any other continent. And I think we have a bigger role to play here if we can get our action together.
I love that. And I love done that. I love HBCUs partnering with the continent and those universities. And I just want to say to each of you, we not only appreciate the burden that you have taken on, but how you do it so effortlessly. So thank you for your time and energy today. We do look forward to deepening our partnership with you and all of the institutions present on the call today. Thank you again, and more to come.
Thank you.
Thompson, back to you.
Man, what a great conversation. Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you, President Akokpo. Thank you, President Allen. Thank you, President Kinloch. We were the beneficiaries today of your wisdom, your leadership, your expertise, and we're so thankful for the opportunity to hear from you all today. We are thrilled to be able to continue our conversation on the opportunity to build relationships between HBCUs and the African continent. I mean, if I can ask one of our tech leads to please spotlight my image at this point, that would be helpful. I want to make sure that I get a chance to introduce properly our next panel, because what you just heard from was HBCU leaders talking about how they want to build relationships to the continent. What we're going to hear next is leaders from the continent who have been building strategies that can support diaspora engagement. You know, speaking of, there was a question that came up in the chat, and as we're working through our new system, we're realizing that when you send questions to us via that Q&A function, if we respond to them, then all participants in this Zoom can see those answers. So if you have messages, resources, ideas, contributions that you want to make a part of this discussion, put those ideas, put those thoughts, put those perspectives in the chat, or in that Q&A, I should say. And then when we respond to them, that gives all attendees, I believe, the opportunity to see how the conversation is emerging. But there was one question that basically asked, does this work connect to the Caribbean? Does this work connect to Latin America and opportunities to engage the diaspora there? The answer to that is absolutely it does. That we're thrilled to be able to have a number of partners on this call who, from their vantage point on the continent of Africa, have built relationships with the diaspora from across the world. And so I'm really pleased to be able to introduce this conversation, and from there to welcome our distinguished leaders to be in dialogue with us. Joining us today to discuss a new era of collaboration with a focus on the perspective of African higher education leaders. Really pleased to welcome Professor Chingarade, the Vice Chancellor of the Women's University in Africa in Zimbabwe, to welcome Professor Funwe, the Vice Chancellor of Kesman's International University in Cameroon, to welcome Professor Oladipo, the Vice Chancellor of Thomas Adewumi University in Nigeria, to welcome Professor Ekle, the Vice President of Ibn Tufayl University in Morocco, to welcome Professor Bararoun Yeretse, the Rector of the University of Burundi in Burundi, and to facilitate our conversation, Mr. Bob Wakesa, the Acting Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. I yield the floor to our moderator, Mr. Wakesa, for what I am sure will be a tremendous conversation. Mr. Wakesa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson, or Dr. Thompson, as the case may be. And thanks for the resilience and the quick action. Indeed, we are unbeatable, and we are determined to proceed, even with the challenges that we face today. I must start by saying that I don't mind being called Mr. Wekesa, but I'm actually Dr. Wekesa and also adjunct professor in a couple of places, but I'm Mr. Wekesa as well. So those titles can be used interchangeably. I wanted to just, start with a big overview of the opportunities that exist. In the previous discussion, the previous panel, some of those ideas have been touched on. And it looks like even as we talk of from dialogue to action, it looks like action is already happening in various places. And it behoves us perhaps to nudge together, to bring together the various activities, the various projects, the various initiatives from the various vantage points, because they're already happening and they can be improved on. We can increase the collaboration and so forth. And also to mention that just this July, we had the Africa-US Universities Network Conference, and I see quite a good number of speakers during that conference that are on this call. This conference was held 1st to 3rd of July here at the University of Witwatersrand. We expect to do another conference in July next year, but let me not use this platform to advertise that too much so that we remain focused on this. My last point before I introduce the very able and distinguished Vice Chancellors is that as the African Center for the Study of the United States here, we do have 3 more centers that have been established recently. One at the University of Pretoria, the other one at the University of Nairobi, and the other one at Makerere University. I'm very glad that I'm moderating this session with Vice Chancellors who are indeed Chief Executive Officers of universities. So they are on the call face. They meet these challenges head on. And I'll suggest at the outset that perhaps they consider establishing African centers of, for the study of the US at their institutions. We'll be glad to work with you. But without much further ado, I think we might want to go straight to the speakers, to the professors who will share their perspectives. We'll start with Professor Francisca Oladipo, VC of Thomas Adeomi University. The question that I'll pose to you, Professor, is the question of what collaboration models between HBCUs and African higher education institutions have been shown to be most significant, to be most promising, and which ones are those that you see as driving cross-continental impact? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wakesa, and good evening from Nigeria, from Abuja. Thank you for having me. And I also want to add my voice to commend the organizers and the tech team for taking steps to arrest the unfortunate intrusion earlier. Back to the question. In my opinion, the partnership or the collaboration model that really holds the most significant promise across the African continent and then the HBCUs are those ones that promote some kind of reciprocity. So where both institutions or partner institutions kind of contribute their unique strength. So the institutions from Africa, they bring in the African perspectives and the strength from Africa. And then, of course, the HBCUs, now also they contribute in some sort of, it may not be generally equal, but it's not going to be something like a kind of a donor kind of thing, but a partnership with each partner contributing something. So, for example, we look at the joint degree partnership model. It's something that has worked across the African continent and collaborations where students, especially graduate students, are jointly taught and supervised for higher degree programs and then earn a strong qualification, jointly provided by the partner institutions. So this is one model that has worked over time. And then the research consortium model is another that I believe has worked. My university, we're just about 4 years old, but we already have partnership with Bowie State University. And then I have co-authored grants with some professors in computer science from the university. We have 5 professors from my university co-author research papers with professors in the School of Business and so on. So this kind of partnership where not one partner, for example, in the US now, doing all the giving, but the 2 partners are, or the more than 2, if they are working together in some form of reciprocity. And the faculty exchange pipeline model, it's one also that hold a lot of promise for the collaboration. Yes, we've had issues now of inability of people to travel because of visa restrictions and travel restrictions. We were supposed to host, for example, the president of Bowie State University sometimes last year, but then there was a U.S. State Department travel alert that says, oh, do not go to Kwara State where my institution is located. So, but we've been able to find some virtual way of doing this exchange where we can we're using technology to bridge the gap so that when they don't physically go visit one another in the institution, they can actually do virtual exchange, and this has hold so many promises. So generally, Seeing the diaspora as Africa's sixth region will mean partners with shared destiny and not just beneficiaries of charity. That, in my opinion, are some of the models that really hold strong promise in driving cross-continental collaboration and impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Oladipo. I think you've given us very clear indications of the pathways across joint research, joint knowledge production, faculty exchange, joint funding, our grant applications, and of course, the platform on which we are is virtual, and where physical exchanges are not possible, we can always connect via these platforms. I'll now turn it over to Professor Chindarade, Vice Chancellor at Women's University in Africa. And it is the same question: what is really prospective? What is promising? Where do we kind of mine the best and significant benefits out of these partnerships?
Thank you very much, Prof. In terms of leveraging best practices for this kind of arrangement, I'll build on what Professor Francesca has just said. What is important is first of all to have a common vision, so that can actually be informed by a clear partnership framework. I think that is critical, so that the knowledge, the partnership, the outputs and outcomes are co-created on an equal footing by the participating institutions. I would give an example of arrangements that have been in place in our context with private sector. In some cases, you have initiatives that then fail to take off as a result of unequal relationships, a lack of a common vision, lack of a common strategy, lack of common values, most importantly. So it's important that we have shared values. Issues around funding, they've been raised before. I'm glad, Prof, that in your introductory remarks, you actually highlighted the connection between this particular panel and the panel that we have just concluded. So issues of funding as well are quite critical. What funding models are available and what can be done to ensure that the available programs are actually seen through. So to me, those are critical issues that require consideration. It's important that in our context, I'm in Zimbabwe, in our context, we have been pursuing an internationalization agenda as a country, and various initiatives have been put in place. But what we have also realized through an assessment that we recently engaged in is that that internationalization drive has not been equitable. It has also not been inclusive. So I'm excited about this initiative because it means we're going to be forging an inclusive internationalization agenda. We are a one people, so the agenda for development, for the development of Africa should also be inclusive, especially considering the role of higher education institutions in the transformation of and modernization of Africa. So the involvement of the diaspora in this particular initiative is quite critical. It then promotes an inclusive industrialization process for the continent. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Professor Chindarade. I think equally very succinct, very to the point. I think you pointed out, all that you've discussed, the points you raised, kind of call upon us to do the hard thinking now, so that when we take off, we don't get challenges ahead. Common vision, developing of frameworks. I guess our colleagues who are handling this platform today, thinking around the models and the templates for frameworks that we can come up. I think I really liked the idea of co-creation. I suppose many on the call today will also appreciate that there is some kind of equality. We focus on values. Sometimes institutions from elsewhere coming onto the continent are considered extractive. And of course, issues to do with funding models, as well as internationalization. My next question takes us back to Professor Oladipo, and we want to narrow down focus a little more on HBCUs and African higher education institutions. What will be your thoughts around this excitement that we already see around partnering specifically with the HBCUs? Just this morning, I read that President Trump, for all his worth, has actually indicated more funding to HBCUs. I guess that is news that might still be filtering through. But I think so that we don't lose focus, maybe what do you see as relations in the specific context of historically Black colleges and universities? Over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator. For me, my excitement stems from, one, the fundamental recognition that we are natural allies. We're just artificially separated by geography. We used to joke in those days that, my color should be my passport, that kind of thing. So, and then because of those circumstances, those geography, and of course, geopolitical and social circumstances, that has brought the separation. And now this initiative is bringing us together, and we have seen a lot of work has been done. Africans, institutions, and then the HBCUs, we share the DNA of excellence under constraints. We are naturally resilient people. Many African institutions, we've had to thrive in very difficult places. My university is located in a community where we have the only medical center, the only elementary school, the only high school. We provide electricity, provide water. And then the mirror, this kind of mirrors the HBCU tradition of providing exceptional outcomes, even despite underdevelopment and difficult circumstances that they find themselves. And secondly, African institutions naturally will serve the similar population with the HBCUs. We share similar aspiration. We educate the emerging leaders for the continent. The same applies to the HBCUs. Historically, they have been known to elevate marginalized people. You see first generation graduates coming from them. So this kind of shared destiny excites me. It makes me know that the partnerships will work against different obstacles that some have been identified. Many more will come, but as they come, we will be able to surmount them because we are resilient people, the African institutions and then the HBCUs. And most importantly, these partnerships will represent a kind of intellectual sovereignty. Imagine African universities not serving out as junior partners, but as somewhat equal partnerships, working together to solve problems that are common across the two continents, the African continent and then North America, especially the USA. We'll be able to kind of set our research priorities, not just some donor set priorities now, but because these are challenges that are common to the partners, they'll be able to set research priorities that will serve the values of both the African communities and then the communities where the HBC use, where they serve, where they set to promote. So I believe, and I'm excited, and I believe everyone is excited about this. We face parallel challenges that require shared solutions on both sides. And once partners are able to find a common ground, they have crossed more than halfway towards solving the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Oladipo. I think as you're speaking, I couldn't help thinking around the concept and notion that has gained traction in the recent past of global Africa. And that kind of connects to W.E. Du Bois' idea of the color line. Ideas that he shared quite a lot. And of course, you talked of shared, challenges, shared aspirations, and shared pathways. I suppose that then taps into the excitement, and the excitement, emotive and emotional motivations for us to get down to do the work that we need to do. I think it will be the same question to Professor Chingarade. What are the points of inflection emotionally in terms of the excitement of the work that we're embarking on? I think you're muted. I mean, you could unmute. Yeah, sure. All right.
My apologies, I hadn't noticed. I was saying for me, the major excitement is coming from an inclusive agenda, as alluded to earlier. We have an agenda for the transformation of our higher education institutions, but we also have a bigger mandate for the transformation of Africa. So to me, an inclusive process that taps into the ideas, the strategies, and the views of everyone who is of African descent, it would actually add value. So that's one key important excitement factor for me. But also knowing the benefits of such collaborations. Of course, there have been challenges here and there, but overall, there have been benefits that have been registered over the years from such collaborations. Some of them have actually been presented earlier from the previous session. We had presentations of existing collaborations and those that are even spanning for decades, and what benefits they've actually brought to both the African higher education institutions and also to the HBCUs. So to me, the knowledge of the benefits that such programs, if well managed, can bring to the continent, and also can also bring in terms of development for Africa, by Africa, and also from the perspective of, say, research by Africa, by Africans on Africa. I think that's one area that we have lagged behind. We have had so much written about Africa from a perspective of other people who are not Africans. So as we jointly come together and develop scholarship around Africa as a united force, I think that will take us far. So the history of successes of such collaborations and benefits that ensue from these collaborations, I think for me, it's also a point of excitement. But looking at the point that you raised in your introductory remarks, you talked about an investment in HBCUs. I also looked at it and read the article. So I'm looking at this as a point of excitement from the perspective of the resources that we've talked about earlier on and the challenges that we sometimes face as higher education institutions in Africa, where in the majority of cases, our universities are funded by governments. And over the years, they've been dwindling resources to support activities of higher education. So to me, another point of excitement is collaboration can actually help in ensuring that we share the resources that are available, and we realize much impact from those resources, the few resources that would be there. So working jointly, it can actually get us more out of the little that is there. So the strengths that are there in one institution can also help to build on the strengths in another institution. So to me, that co-creation, co-financing, co-supporting would actually bring significant results for the African continent and for all the participating institutions. So thank you. I think that's how I would respond to your question on excitements around this.
Thank you. Exciting times indeed. I think you touched on quite some key areas of focus. I particularly take on board the idea of not reinventing the wheel, but building on initiatives that have succeeded. And I suppose perhaps one of the things we'll want to do is to look at what has succeeded in the very many partnerships, exchanges, joint research, and so forth already that we can adopt and adapt to our various institutional setups. And of course, you've also touched on the whole idea of funding. I think we cannot run away from it. We'll have to think very strategically on that. We'll have to then transition to the third question, and again, we'll circle back to Professor Oladipo. And I think this relates to an issue that was touched on in the first panel around how the partnership can actually help, partnerships with HBCUs can help African institutions in terms of advancing the skills, the capacity, the capabilities of African faculty, meaning lecturers, researchers, administrators, students, and so forth. And I say this very much aware of Professor Chingarade's idea of being shared values and so forth. Obviously, HBCUs are not coming to dictate to us, but we also take cognizance of the fact that some of the HBCUs have been around for over 100 years. They benefit from the US, academic environment and so forth. So we can learn from them as they learn from us as well. But over to you. I don't want to pull the carpet under your feet. So over to you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Bob. I think you are right. We should look at reciprocal capacity building for the faculty, for the students, and even for professional growth for both continents. If we look at faculty development, for example, we can have virtual co-teaching of modules where faculties from across the partnering institutions can jointly develop teaching modules that can be administered to students from those institutions. We had a similar one under the COIL with Bowie State University, the College of Business, with Dr. Kapoor, designing an entrepreneurship course for the Faculty of Business in my university. So while that was going on, there were a number of meetings between the faculties who are teaching the course, and they were able to learn a lot from one another. I mean, Dr. Kapoor, who is in there at some point, says, "Oh, I feel like I've visited Nigeria with all of the things," because it involved the students having to go to some local businesses to conduct some survey and all of that. And that gave the faculty over there at Bowie State University an idea of some of the challenges that businesses in local communities in Nigeria, if I don't want to generalize for Africa, I've been to many African countries and we generally face similar constraints of street trading and then wares getting damaged and then all of that. So, and they were able to design this entrepreneurship course around these business concerns. And the faculty members in my university learned a new way of designing a courseware. We have a way of doing it, but they now learned an innovative way of designing coursewares that they were able to, improve on the learning outcomes of the entrepreneurship course. The joint research appointment should be another approach that can, can also facilitate faculty development. Can we consider the possibility of faculty holding concurrent research position in partner institutions? I know as a vice chancellor, I get emails and messages on LinkedIn from diaspora professors wanting to have some adjunctship in my university, but it doesn't really flow that much the other way. Having faculties from Africa holding adjunctship professorship position in America. So this could be one way to also enhance faculty development, so such that 5 more minutes. Sorry. Oh, I hope I have that message. So that that will also enhance faculty development. And then another exchange could be professional development exchange. We've spoken about research, faculty exchanges in area for teaching and research. There could be faculty exchange for professional development as well, where faculties from partner institutions can visit to not just to come and conduct research now or to teach, but to kind of in a way study some best practices in partner institutions. So we can have faculties from the US coming to Nigeria or to South Africa to look at best practices in agricultural innovation, in renewable energy. So the partnership should be across the Atlantic. It shouldn't be us going to the HBCUs or any of the other hosting institutions in the US, but they should also come and learn from the circumstances in the African countries. For students, we can think of dual campus experiences where these are already in some places happening, where students get to spend a portion of their degree programs at partnering institutions. We see a lot of African students wanting to go to the US. We don't have too many students from the HBCUs wanting to come to Africa. They're not equal. We do have some, but they're really not equal. I know Harvard has the Center for African Studies where we have a kind of student exchange with South Africa and some institutions in sub-Saharan Africa, but we need to have more of them coming from the global north down to the global south. Collaborative project-based learning is another way to develop capacity in the students. And then establishment of mentorship networks across the two institutions where we have professors from African institutions mentoring students from the partner institutions in the US. And then the same, so there can be a network of professors and graduate students from across these two institutions or partnering institutions, also mentoring students from a group of students from the partnership institution. So this one is not Nigeria mentoring BUI or BUI mentoring Nigeria, but we have BUI Nigeria together, mentoring students from BUI Nigeria together. And if we look at professional growth, perhaps we should also extend this beyond partnership between institutions, but to bring in industry partnership triangulation. So we can have industries in African countries and industries in the US also joining the collaborative partnership with the institutions. So we have a kind of a triangulation. So, but the key success factor here is to ensure that the partnerships create value for participants and it meets their immediate career goals for the faculty, for the students, and then for the community, generally, our community, the African universities community, the HBCUs, and then all the other partners that have come together to put this together, that all the goals of having symposium like this, they are met, that we can move from talking to more action. There are some actions, but we need more actions. We need to retool some of the actions. I want to look forward to welcoming Professor Thompson to Nigeria and not me looking forward to the US Embassy in Lagos granting me visa to go and meet him or her in the US. We need to have more traffic coming from the other side down to Africa. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Oladipo. And I have the big challenge of trying to close this panel. We lost quite some substantive time managing the situation that we encountered earlier on, and therefore we're being advised to kind of summarize. Professor Oladipo, definitely the points you raised are very important, and I think we'll follow up on many of those in a more concretized manner, and even in the breakout sessions that we have ahead. But I would like to suggest that the next two questions, the responses be summarized in the interest of time, perhaps 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes each. I will ask Julian Thompson to allow me that leeway. These questions then will be leading, will be futuristic in the form of closing. So to Professor Chingarad, and of course I say that with understanding, both of you are my seniors, so it's like I'm dictating to my seniors, but I'm in that tight
You're the boss. You're the boss.
So Professor Chingarade, what do you see as a pathway forward in terms of sustainability? We've discussed of potential ideas, but what are the areas in which we can sustain this program so that they are not kind of in, out very quickly without looking into the future of 5, 10 years, perhaps 100 years even. Over to you in a summarized form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think in my earlier remarks, I made reference to a clear partnership framework. I think that is critical. Then, of course, building sustainability into the design of the program itself. It should be clear from the onset how sustainability is going to be ensured in that particular program. Then, of course, issues to do with compatibility of partner institutions. I think that can be considered in the development of the partnership framework. Is there compatibility in terms of values, in terms of the vision, in terms of the agenda? And of course, come up with a clear action plan that would be followed through. I think one of the main challenges is lack of a monitoring, evaluation, and maybe, if I may say, learning platform. I like the idea that was presented earlier in the earlier session, where I can't remember which professor was talking about weekly review meetings and progress assessment meetings. So to me, those are critical because you quickly observe a problem and come up with solutions to those problems that would have been identified. So to me, what's critical, we talked about issues of funding earlier. Those are critical for them to be laid out from the onset, who is responsible for what, and what are the benefits ensuing for the institutions that are involved. A quality assurance framework as well is quite important because these issues also come with issues to do with quality. So it's important if frameworks are developed, that quality assurance mechanisms are also laid out. So in brief, I would say for the programs of this nature to be sustainable, they require academic, they require financial and organizational integrity. I think to me, that's my assessment. There should be distinctive branding of those programs. That's why I talked about quality assurance, workload, who is doing what. I talked about responsibilities. Then, of course, the strategic plan for the program should actually be very clearly laid out and followed through with clear M&E as well as learning platforms for the initiatives. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor Chingarade. You've given us a very structured strategic management approach. I will, and of course, this has been recorded, so it will come through in the report that we're going to have. Final word from Professor Oladipo, also in a summarized fashion. How can tech, particularly in this AI era, I know this is a big topic that we can discuss for many minutes, but if you could round us up with the path forward in terms of the use of digital technologies and AI.
Yes, thank you, moderator. Just to close, like you said, we should look at hybrid learning platforms. For example, I remember we built one with Bowie State University at that time. And then we should also look at building research collaboration infrastructure where we can have multi-institutional research projects on shared digital platforms, and then researchers can collaboratively work on them. We can have virtual exchange programs where we've already spoken about that extensively. We're in the era of artificial intelligence now, so we can use AI to supercharge the partnership. And then talking about verification of credentials obtained from some of these exchanges, blockchain is another technology that can assist in verifying these credentials. But above all, there is a need to have a multiplication strategy, whether it's going to be through technology or otherwise. The system must be able to sustain itself through a multiplication strategy. And then, of course, financing. Most partnerships collapse after some times because who is going to be funding? So there may be need to introduce something like revenue generation through executive education, having a strong alumni network that will also form part of the multiplication strategy and willing to give back. That will be all from me in terms of closing. I look forward to further discussion, but I will also say that we should strengthen these multi-stakeholder platforms that we have that has brought us together today. And we can do that using technology to continue to have virtual engagement until it is necessary for us to really come together face to face. Because
Thank you.
Africans want a lot of face to face. We're communal people. We want to see from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellors, professors. As you can see, the super moderator, Dr. Thompson, has unmuted and is on camera. So I will not even add a word. Over to you, Thompson, and take us from there. And once more, thank you for the focused and interesting and decisive contributions. Thank you. Cheers.
Good day, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. While we wait for Julie and Thompson to come back in, we just reached discussions so far from the vice chancellors and the presidents of the HBCUs. If you can, we just want for you to comment, what are some of the actionable insights that you have learned from the vice chancellors from that panel 2, and also the HBCU presidents from panel 1? So at the moment, you can use the Q&A feature and jot down what are some of the most actionable insights that you have heard from either of those 2 panels. And while you do that, I do want to highlight some of the great feedback and some of the resources that we are getting from our phenomenal attendees. You know, one person here said several attendees have emphasized the need for concrete partnership frameworks. The question is, what specific institutional mechanisms, agreements, and implementation timelines should both HBCUs and African institutions establish to move to active collaboration in priority areas such as health sciences, technology transfer, and faculty exchange programs? Please stay tuned. We're actually going to be discussing that in the next panel. I also do want to highlight a great resource that has been posted. We actually have had several faculty members come from the United States and actually get hosted at African institutions. One of that is the Carnegie Foundation, the African Diaspora Program. If you go to the IIE website, you should see that fellowship. It's an all-expense paid, essentially sabbatical for university professors from the US to actually be hosted at African institutions and do phenomenal work. So in terms of cross-faculty exchanges, in terms of doing great work, publishing, and academic innovation, that is one great resource. And we want to thank our partners at the Carnegie Diaspora, the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellow Program for their continued investment in the work. We also want to highlight the Fulbright Fellowships that are amazing. We have actually a cross-exchange program where faculty members and professors from African institutions can be hosted at institutions as well. So we just want to amplify these amazing opportunities, and there's several more. We're seeing so many great answers in the chat and so many great questions in the chat. We do want to reiterate that the theme of this program is from dialogue to action. And so we're not just going to be speaking about this. In the interest of time, we have removed the breakout sessions. And what we're going to be doing is after this session is over, we are going to be having focus groups for each of those 5 breakout sessions that we were going to have. And so we want to hear your continued feedback. We want to hear your thoughts, and we want to begin to put together that viable framework for those cross-continental collaborations. I do also want to highlight, let's see. Oh, this is such an interesting comment. I do also want to highlight the student perspectives, because the students are often the end users of this phenomenal work and this phenomenal engagement. And I have one message here I do want to amplify. I see here, I'm a nursing alumni from KYSU. I graduated in 2015, and I met President Valerie Kinloch in Ghana. Love it. So we're already seeing the impact from these cross-continental partnerships. Alicia says, I'm interested in building bridges from the US to West Africa, particularly Ghana. I would like to know what gaps need to be filled and how I can initiate a program for healthcare professionals, especially for student nurses to travel to Ghana and learn from hospitals and healthcare in Ghana. We just want to amplify some of these. We have students who are also invested in this work, alumni, recent alumni and professionals. And so we want to make sure that we are highlighting these as well. I think the first step would be just to initiate a conversation. I think Dr. Valerie Kinloch, President Kinloch, is very, as you can see, very engaged and continues to do phenomenal work. And, the important thing is to have those stakeholders in the room who can actually make those decisions. And we actually want to preview that. And we want to preview an event that we will be having in October 17th, about actually establishing these institution to institution partnerships. And so please stay tuned for that. Let's see, what else can we highlight? What else can we amplify? Wonderful. Let's see. I'm scrolling through the chat. I do want to ask if you know someone who should be a part of this meeting, feel free to continue to send them the link. We do see that more people are joining, and we do see invitations for more people to join. So feel free to send them the link, and they have. I do want to pause there and see if we have Julian back. Let's see. I do not see Julian. So I'm going to go ahead and invite us to the next panel. And so I do want to make sure that our panelists are in the room. So I'm very, very excited to invite the next 3 speakers to the From Dialogue to Action stage. So this panel is going to focus on from ideation to implementation, innovations for policy and practice. From ideation to implementation, innovations for policy and practice. And I do want to welcome to the stage Dr. Lydia Bossere from 8B Education Investments. Dr. Bossere, if you can hear me, please accept the invitation to be a panelist, and we will go ahead and spotlight your video. Thank you, Dr. Bossere. We also have Dr. Beverly Booker Amma from HBCU Africa Education Coalition. She is here. Thank you, Dr. Beverly Booker Amma, for accepting the invitation. And last but certainly not least, we have Professor Reginald Nazor, who is the executive director of the Historic Africa Historic African Diaspora Placement Program, also known as HEIs, one of the main conveners of this conference. Professor Nazor, you're invited. Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things that I do want to point out is that we've had a lot of rich conversation today. And so I do want to go straight to the meat of the matter, which is a lot of what people are asking, right? What infrastructures should be built and strengthened for us to be able to scale and sustain this work? I'll go first to you, Professor Nazor.
Yeah, thank you, Chichi, and thank you, colleagues. In fact, I thank all the panels, including the dignitaries that provided the opening remarks. Panel 1 did an excellent job sharing what the respective institutions are engaged with African countries. Panel 2 that we just saw a moment ago treated us to a whole lot more, including presenting some critical insights into what we need to do. And then I took some notes from what panelist 2 shared, highlights from it. And then a number of what they shared, including the need for a common framework, include for equitable partnerships, and some of the challenges they mentioned and actually elaborated on, emphasize the need to develop, to have a holistic partnership framework, to guide the work in cross-continental collaboration between HBCUs and African institutions. Hadib recognizes that without foundational pillars that are robust enough to sustain cross-continental partnerships, that the partnerships will hardly be sustainable and the opportunities will hardly be optimized, and then the potentials will not be harnessed in full. Although the panel 1 and even 2 shared in their respective ways that there are actions already happening. However, HBCU and African initiatives collaborations are under-resourced. They are under-resourced. That was emphasized over and over. Even though some innovative and inspiring directions, projects that will point to new directions, we are shared. In fact, shared, and I really, really enjoyed the direction they are pointing us. I mean, anybody interested in future-facing, future-shaping with regard to HBCU African collaboration will be interested in some of the things, or most of the things we heard from that panel. And so it gives us food for thought, what they shared. And I want to say that Hadib had the good fortune of partnering with, collaborating with the UNCF and AAU to convene this From Dialogue to Action Symposium. And I want to commend very highly AAU and UNCF for being amazing partners. In fact, they are irreducibly amazing. I don't know how else to put it. So you see, even the way, the resilience in coming back in spite of the challenges we have, to demonstrate clearly that they and we all are the quintessential comeback kids. So they deserve a lot of commendation. So Hadib understands because its mission is essentially to foster a partnership between African diaspora professionals in the United States with Africa. So we know that right from time, and we know that some of those issues that arose from the discussions, conversations of panels 1 and 2 in particular, have been recurring. They seem to be, perennial issues that need to be addressed. So what did Hadib do in response? Hadib developed a framework, a strategic framework for supporting institutions interested or engaged in cross-continental partnership to really develop mutually beneficial, sustainable partnerships. Hadib has done that, and we are willing, Hadib is willing, consistent with its mission, to work with HBCUs and African institutions interested in ratcheting up their work, in optimizing the potentials and harnessing all the opportunities that exist. Yes, although work is going on here and there, action is happening here and there, but as we can see, there is hardly much coherence and sustainability. And as one notable Nigerian novelist published in 1975 in his book, Chinua Achebe, he said, "This is still morning yet on Creation Day. In spite of the missed opportunities, this is still morning." And so the framework that Hadib developed that to use in supporting as an analytical template to support institutions to engage in this work has 6 components. The first component is shared vision within the institution. It's vision about HBCUs, Africa collaboration that is shared across the hierarchies within the university institutions and across the units within the institution, even among their stakeholders and alumni. Without a shared vision and co-ownership and shared responsibilities in this kind of work, is likely to gain the kind of buy-in that will result into sustainable collaboration. So the number 1 component of the framework is shared vision that is entrenched in the institution and even included in the strategic plans of the institution and supported by governing boards, stakeholders, and institutional leaders at every level. So the second component there is organizational and partnership. And it was mentioned there that the issue of partnership can be an issue under organization, so that there will be no missing links in it. So it entails developing local, regional, and continental partnership in order to sustain.
Professor
Yes.
Nazor, I'm so sorry to cut in, but since we have a very limited time for this panel, I wonder if you could summarize the pillars that you mentioned.
Okay.
I see a lot of hearts. I see a lot of thumbs up. I think the first pillar of shared vision resonated quite deeply with a lot of participants. And so I just want to make sure that our other panelists have enough time for this very rich conversation.
In order not to hold our audience in suspense, I'll go through the 6. I've just mentioned the components, depending on how much time we have. Yeah, I mentioned the organizational and partnership component. Then the third one is the big elephant in the room, sustainable funding. Funding came up over and over. And so we've been seeing it historically at every point. In fact, one of the panelists says most partnerships collapse after some time due to funding challenges. So for this, as a way, Hadib's idea of addressing this is that Hadib is actually consulting actively to establish what we call HBCUs engagement with Africa Fund. And this fund will be dedicated to supporting institutions engaged in the kind of cross-continental collaborations we're talking about. Hadib is even going beyond that to propose to our partners, the establishment of what would be called HBCU Engagement with Africa Consortium. It is this consortium that will have the responsibility of growing and managing the fund so that we can ensure that this question of lack of funding, tampering or militating against HBCUs partnering with Africa would be a thing of the past. So the fourth component here is mutually beneficial programming. We heard from partners that, especially the vice president, the vice chancellor of the university, women's university in Zimbabwe, is that some kind of lopsidedness, that there has to be a kind of fairness and equity in the partnership, in the programs. So, but we must ensure, based on our framework, we must ensure that for the partnerships to be sustainable, the initiatives around which the partnerships are built align with the strategic priorities and goals of partnering of institutions. That is the way to ensure this, ensure the fairness. And then the third one also came up, and quality assurance is a component in this framework. And so the accountability and so, because governing boards, stakeholders, and funding agencies are more likely to sustain support for institutional engagement in cross-continental collaboration if there is a periodic methodical evaluation of the internal and external impacts of the collaboration. And then the sixth component is strategic policy advocacy. So if an institution is comfortable enough to engage in advocacy for this kind of cross-continental partnership, it will enhance the visibility of the institution and the profile, especially in matters concerning cross-continental collaborations. Not only that, it will put pressure on the institution to walk the talk, because charity begins at home. And that visibility can attract sponsors and donors that can help sustain the projects, the collaboration that the institution is seeking. And the dynamic interaction of the 6 structural components of the framework create a synergy that enable a sustainable, mutually beneficial cross-continental collaborations. If each of those components operationalize, so the combined effect of their interaction will result into a dynamic that will give us that sustainability that we're looking for. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Professor Nazor, for those 6 strategic pillars for how we can actually strengthen and build infrastructure that can support this work, not just to scale, but to sustain. And Dr. Booker Amma, I just want to hand it over to you to talk about how to actually operationalize these ventures that we're talking about. I know you've had significant work in bringing students from the continent to the US, and likewise from the US to the continent, partnering with several institutions. I want to ask you this question: how do we better align those institutional missions and strategic priorities so that we can support these cross-continental collaborations?
Sure. Thank you, Chi-Chi. I do want to take a quick minute or a couple seconds to say thank you to Unite. Thank you to UNCF for this opportunity for all of us, and certainly greetings to all the dignitaries that are in the audience. So it's just important to say that. So I want to answer your question in 2 parts, and I'm going to try to go quickly in the essence of time. So I want to answer in 2 parts. One, the first part of what is essential in building partnership. And then 2, I think some concrete examples are important. And then like 2B is an invitation, right? So I think 1, to answer your question, to create alignment with institutional missions, it has to be from a point of Pan-African coalition building. We have to be working toward liberating Africa and the diaspora in a strategic way. And so it has to be coalition building. It has to be leveraging our strengths. I want to go back quickly to what President Allen said about the opportunity that the pandemic made. It was traumatic, but for her institution, it allowed them to create virtual exchange, right? And for the organization that I work for, HBCU Africa Education Coalition, the birth and crystallization of that was during the pandemic. There were about 5 to 6 HBCUs, African universities, and a nonprofit who came together where, like President Allen said, travel had to stop. So we started talking about meeting virtually like every week. What are the disparity gaps of study research abroad? What are the connections that African-based universities and HBCUs and allied institutions need to make? And so over that year, we came up with the idea that we would better be served working in coalition rather than silos. That's one of the, I guess, historical challenges with us. I think globally as Africans, we have suffered from the divide and conquer strategy. And so we have said it's incredibly important to work as coalition. We don't have to do everything separately. So we formed the HBCU Africa Education Coalition, and the mission of that is the 100,000 Strong Africa Initiative for in 20 years to see that 50,000 students from the diaspora travel and engage in the continent doing research study abroad. But then the equitable part of that the last panel talked about is engaging African students from the continent to attend HBCUs for degree-seeking programs and also faculty exchange. So that's the equity part of it. So HEIs has had 4 conferences. The last one was in the United States at one of the founding member institutions, Clark Atlanta University. Thank you, Dr. Starr, President French Jr., and all of the wonderful leadership at Clark Atlanta for hosting the conference and for Unite being a partner. And Dr. Bosere for coming and being a phenomenal panelist. And so one of the things that we have done since we started 5 to 8 universities and organizations, now we're 25 to 30. And it's the idea that we're leveraging our strengths. So this year, for example, in 2026, we'll have 6 different programs that focus on research study abroad, taking students to different parts of Africa. But also we have in place where every country we go to, we connect with the African universities there and also recruit students to come to HBCUs. So that helps with enrollment needs of HBCUs and vice versa. Our students also get to think about doing their master's degree or doctorate degree at an African-based university, right? So I think one thing is our viewpoint is that African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And so we have done that. And so just a couple of examples, and then Dr. Chichi, I'm going to wrap it up. So we have formed this year, we outdoored it at the conference, the Pan-African Research Coalition Institute. And I'm so glad I heard a lot of people call for what we have done in terms of infrastructure. And it's meant to be a research hub across the continents to bring exchange and research to address our real world problems in many different domains. Like one of the young ladies said, students, about nursing and maternal health. We have that small learning community that's going to be doing work in Ghana this summer. And so the Pan-African Research Coalition Institute brings everybody together. And then I just want to shout out some people like Dr. Ham, Dr. Stevenson, Provost Vice Chancellor Wooten. They're an example of, they're a part of the Hyatt Coalition, all of those North Carolina HBCUs, including Dr. Tyson also. They bring together all of the North Carolina HBCUs, and instead of working in silos, they work together, right, to give greater access. to recruit students from the continent. And so I think when you talk about an international organization like HEIs working together, and then also HBCUs in those different spaces and states working together to grant greater access both on the continent and the US. And then the final thing I would say is one last example of coalition building in an invitation on behalf of the co-chairs of HEIs. The first co-chair is Vice Chancellor Abeku Blankson, who is the president of the African University of Communication and Business. And the second co-chair is Provost Archibald Vanderpoy, and he is the provost of Houston-Tillotson University. And that is symbolic when we talk about this collaboration, because you have representation of an African university, representation of an HBCU coming together to foster greater partnership. And they have just done something historic in Ghana. They now have a 2x2 partnership for the students in Ghana and other parts of Africa to come to AUCB and start degree-seeking programs that can funnel them to AUCB and then to HTU to address some of the visa issues, financial challenges, other things, to which we're also glad to be partnering and trying to look for a partnership with Dr. Bosere. So I'm interested to hear about her great work too, more about her great work. And so this summer, in addition to our 6 programs, one which is Ghana, and all universities are welcome to have your students apply to our programs. We'll make sure on your website of Action, Dr. Chichi, we give that application. But we're also having a high-level administrator part to come and engage with Park and be hosted by the 2 co-chairs to get to know what it's all about. And that is June the 4th through the 9th. And so we want that engagement. And so I'm really excited to have heard all of the panelists, because we have been building the infrastructure together and united for what everybody is calling for. So I want to stop there and make sure I give Dr. Bosere, my good colleague, her time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beverly Booker Ama. I think that was a very real lived experience and real example of how we can actually partner sustainably and tangibly where it's mutually beneficial. Where there's accountability and quality assurance in place. I had the privilege of being at the HEIs conference as well, and just hearing the students and how their lives have changed, hearing the institutions and how their institutions have changed. And I think we do want to make sure to bring on the phenomenal Dr. Lydia Bosere, who needs absolutely no introduction, but I just want to make sure that if you hear nothing else from this entire convening, we want to amplify the work that 8B.Africa is doing. And here's why. We can talk in abstraction about these various key moments, key challenges, key ideas. But if we do not have the funding to actually do this, it's just a bright idea. And so that is why the mission of From Dialogue to Action is highlighting 8B.Africa. And I want to use this question to bring you up, Dr. Bosere, and just for you to shine light on the incredible work that you're doing, which is addressing the financing issue, right? And so I want to ask you this question. How do we ensure that our partnerships are not just symbolic, but truly transformative, right? And so I want to yield the floor to you. Welcome to From Dialogue to Action, Dr. Bosere.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Esimai. Thank you so much, the Association of African Universities, HADIP, ACBF, and as well as UNCF for putting this together and for managing the morning despite its many challenges. Really grateful for the floor. The question you ask, Dr. Chichi, is absolutely central to what we do. What keeps us awake is scale. What we do not want to be doing, as some of the speakers have already mentioned, is more of the same and hoping for different outcomes. We are in a constrained environment. We're in a constrained environment policy-wise, so we need to innovate to overcome those constraints. We're in a fiscally constrained space. African countries are spending more servicing their debt than for their social policy programs. So the kinds of examples that have been shared earlier of, for example, a Rwandan government paying for scholarships for students to come into an HBCUs, those days are behind us. They are not in front of us. So we have to innovate in that way. So that constraining policy environments requires all of us to think outside the box. I'm going to make 3 comments as a background and then make 3 observations on the financing side, and then, similar to Dr. Ama, make an invitation for colleagues to think together about how we move forward. In terms of background, it is valuable to remember that we come from greater places, right? We talked about how Kwame Nkrumah was at Lincoln College. We have a past that was big and was full of ideas and full of outcomes. But the present is one that has faced, as I've mentioned, a number of challenges. The future, however, is bright. The future is bright for demographic reasons. Some of the panelists have mentioned that Africa has the youngest population. We have the largest university age population for the next 50 years. That's just a fact. And how we use it, particularly when the US itself is facing a demographic cliff, i.e. we have fewer students who are university age coming to universities, is that moment of opportunity. So that's sort of the backstory. The backstory is timeline-wise, we came from good places, we faced many challenges, we have a bright future. But here is the elephant in the room. To take advantage of that bright future, a bit like Dr. Nazor said, we have to address the financing. Why is that important? Number one, if we cannot show that what we do contributes to the bottom line, over time, support for it in our various institutions wanes. This is a point that is made across the board. How do we make sure that faculty exchanges, joint research initiatives, all of that somehow gives us the footprint on the continent that enables more African students to come onto our campuses? That's just a fact. We care about the bottom line as much as we care about all of the intellectual output as well. So how do we make sure that we are able to check that box of the bottom line? Number 2, without the financing, we cannot even show up to recruit on the continent. So I go to many, many events. I just spent 9 weeks away from the US, and a large part of that was on the continent. And I would go to events being hosted by agents, and the overwhelming number of universities there are not HBCUs. And even when there are HBCUs, the kinds of questions that African students will ask are around financing. How much can you fund me? Therefore, we go back to the bottom line. You may have a few scholarships. You will not be able to fund every smart, qualified student using a scholarship. So we need to innovate. Then the last thing that I would say is we then have this enrollment challenge where we know that we have African American students in our classrooms that would benefit greatly from that interchange with African students, but our African students are not able to show up regardless the number of MOUs we have and how we're thinking about the reciprocity isn't there because the African students cannot afford the financing. So what we do at HB Education Investments is to address this by partnering with a number of stakeholders. Number 1 is the universities themselves. How do we make sure that your ability to offer some discounting for the students enables you to fill your classroom as opposed to not, which is the current situation. So we partner with universities. We partner with banks and financial institutions. They want to lend to African students affordably, but they cannot in a context where there is no data on what African students do after they graduate. You at HBCUs know that. the capital markets do not. You know that African students in your classrooms perform well and they're up there with the best and they will graduate and they will get jobs, but there's no financing that can be unlocked at scale unless that data is available. So we want to make sure that the capital markets know that. We're then partnering with Impact Capital. We are really excited about what we have done so far in being able to get the kinds of partners that would ordinarily be in the scholarship space where you can support one student. And I was for many years that student who kept getting scholarships until I wasn't getting those scholarships. And then I realized just how bare the landscape was without enough opportunity. You want to partner, we are partnering with those entities that are ordinarily in that space of charity and philanthropy to leverage their capital to reduce the risk that the capital markets perceive in African students in order to unlock fair lending at scale. The reality is, if we are relying on the goodwill of strangers, there will always be one of us that gets that opportunity. It'll never be at scale. For us to unleash African brilliance into global spaces and start marching, as we absolutely can, students from India, students from China, who demographically we are at similar numbers, if we were to really take advantage of financing, we would be able to show up in similar numbers. And we, as the global African diaspora, I'm taking a variation of what Dr. Wekesa said, as the global African diaspora, we need more of us in all of the places where the future is being built. And we do not get there if we do not think innovatively about financing. And let me make one last point. Somebody asked, I believe it was Ed, what is the headline we want to see written in 10 years? 10 years is 2035. By 2035, Africa has more young people in the labor market every year than the rest of the world combined. Africa will be putting more young people in the labor market every year. Let that sink in. Basically, more Africans will be turning 18 than anybody else, all of the other regions of the world combined. The headline I would like to see for that, and I wrote it down so that I can read it out, is the new Alexandria for the global African diaspora, and then an examination of how HBCUs became that center of future building and global solutions seeking, not just solutions for African diaspora problems, but for global problems. That is what the future can hold if we think innovatively and out of the box. I thank you once again, Dr. Esimai. I thank you, Julian and UNCF, for the opportunity, and very much look forward to talking to many of you, including at the event on the 17th of October, about how we can partner with all of your universities to both expand your African footprint in terms of being visible on the landscape, in partnership with all of the partners who have been in this conference, in addition to thinking through how we can work together on the financing to turn the dreams into reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bossere. What powerful comments, and I love that headline. I believe that this is the initiation of that Alexandria, is what we're seeing in the room. We have several stakeholders in the audience. I saw many resonate with your comments, and I do want to thank you for that invitation to the October 17th event. If you are with us, I do want to hand over to Julian for just closing and reflection. But before I do that, I do want to thank again our panelists, Dr. Lydia Bossere, thank you, from 8D Africa, Dr. Beverly Booker Ama from the HBCU Africa Education Coalition, and of course, Professor Nazor from HEDIB. Thank you all for such insightful comments. Julian, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Esimai, and thank you, Dr. Bossere, Dr. Ahmad, Professor Nazor, for your wonderful contributions to today's discussion. We are a little bit over time, but I wouldn't want to end this conversation without at least some signal points on how we as a UNCF team, in partnership with all of our colleagues, will be taking dialogue into action in the coming weeks, months, and ideally years. We've established a conference website in partnership with our conference organizers. And on that website, we're going to be updating the page with additional calls to action that can inspire our group to be able to connect with each other. So we have a few on there that have been collected even over the course of this conversation, including a research instrument that UNCF is implementing. There's our partnership with 8B. So if you're an HBCU partner and you'd like to identify ways to directly start to engage with enrolling students on the African continent, we have that webinar registration link available. And we've been collecting other resources and opportunities throughout this discussion, which we'll be adding to that website as well. So please bookmark it. It'll be an important space for us to get together. You'll also receive in the coming days an email from our conference, which will ask, how do you want to stay involved with us, with our work, and with the conversations that will continue to build bridges between HBCUs and African higher education institutions? If not for our disturbance today, we would have had some breakout sessions among colleagues and individuals in the space where we would have discussed enrollment and financing, collaborations around research and research engagement, capacity building, diaspora advocacy and empowerment, and the important student perspective to ensure that students have an opportunity to have their voices and leadership activated. So if you want to be a part of some of those ongoing conversations, we want to make sure as organizers of this conference that we provide vehicles and vessels to be able to keep those conversations going, but then more critically, to begin to take some of the actions that will bridge our communities together. I want to once again appreciate the organizing entities that brought this space together. The United Negro College Fund, of which I'm proud to be a representative, the Association of African Universities, the Africa Capacity Building Foundation, and the Historic African Diaspora Placement Programs. Each of our organizations have updated opportunities for partnership on our respective websites, which you can also find via the link in the chat. So please do bookmark that link. We'll be updating it. Look out for an email from us where we want to hear about your aspirations to continue partnership and engagement. And otherwise, please be inspired by the opportunity we had today to build community, the opportunity to overcome some obstacles, and therefore know that we have much more that we can do when we put our minds, our hearts, and an intentionality into the types of relationships that we know are going to be important for our people. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation in today's space. And we'll look forward to inviting you to the next opportunity we have to create action out of dialogue. Thank you very much, everyone.